Mother Bear rescued injured kid and took it to hospital. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The fading afternoon light filtered through the auburn leaves of Pinewood Valley, casting long shadows across the deserted playground at the edge of town. 8-year-old Oliver Reed kicked at the fallen leaves, his breath visible in the crisp autumn air as he ventured closer to the forest edge. His mother had warned him to stay within sight of the swings, but the flash of a monarch butterfly with vibrant orange wings had caught his attention, leading him farther from safety with each step. Just a little closer, Oliver whispered to himself, his small hands outstretched toward the butterfly that danced just beyond his reach. The sounds of other children playing grew distant behind him as he crossed the invisible boundary between the maintained park grass and the wild undergrowth of the forest. Deep within those same woods, a massive brown bear named by locals, as Sierra moved cautiously through the underbrush, her 2 small cubs tumbling behind her. She had been roaming these forests for years, mostly keeping her distance from the strange 2-legged creatures whose territory bordered her own. Sierra's powerful nose twitched as she caught the scent of the late-season berries she had been searching for, but another smell, unfamiliar yet somehow stirring, made her pause. Her ears perked forward at a sound that didn't belong to the forest. Oliver didn't see the gnarled root protruding from the ground until it was too late. His foot caught, and he pitched forward with a startled cry, tumbling down a small embankment. Pain shot through his leg as he landed awkwardly, twisting his ankle beneath him. The sound that escaped his lips wasn't just a cry of surprise, but a wail of genuine agony that echoed through the trees. "Help!" he called out, his voice breaking with sobs. "Somebody help me!" But the wind carried his words away from the playground, deeper into the forest where no human would hear him. Sierra froze at the sound. The high-pitched cry triggered something primal in her, not hunger, not aggression, but a maternal instinct that transcended species. It was the same sound her cubs made when in distress, though higher and more fragile. She nudged her cubs underneath a thick bush, grunting softly as if telling them to stay put, then rose to her full height and sniffed the air. Oliver tried to stand, but the moment he put weight on his injured ankle, he collapsed again with a whimper. Tears streamed down his freckled face as he realized how far he had wandered. The forest suddenly seemed darker, the trees taller, and the silence heavier than before. He hugged his knees to his chest, his small body shivering from both pain and growing fear. "Mom," he whispered, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "I'm sorry." The cracking of twigs nearby made Oliver's head snap up. His eyes widened with terror as the undergrowth parted and Sierra emerged into the small clearing where he sat huddled. She was enormous, over 6 feet tall on her hind legs, with dense brown fur and eyes that seemed to contain all the wisdom of the ancient forest. Oliver's scream died in his throat. Every instinct told him to run, but his injured ankle kept him rooted to the spot. He closed his eyes tightly, certain that his disobedience had led to this moment, that he would never see his mother again, never apologize for wandering away. But the attack never came. Instead, Oliver felt warm breath against his tear-stained face. He opened his eyes to find Sierra had lowered herself to all fours and was studying him with an expression that seemed almost concerned. The massive bear circled him slowly, sniffing at his injured ankle, which had already begun to swell beneath his jeans. "Please, don't hurt me," Oliver whispered, his voice barely audible. Sierra made a soft chuffing sound, almost like a sigh. Then, with gentleness that seemed impossible for such a powerful creature, She nudged Oliver's shoulder with her muzzle. The boy flinched at first, then realized the bear wasn't trying to harm him. Sierra continued nudging him, more insistently now, as if trying to communicate something. When Oliver didn't move, Sierra made her intentions clear. She carefully gripped the back of his jacket between her teeth and lifted him, as if he weighed nothing at all. Oliver gasped, certain now that this was the end. But instead of feeling teeth pierce his skin, he found himself being cradled against the bear's warm fur. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice trembling, though he knew the animal couldn't answer. He hung limply in Sierra's gentle grip, too afraid to struggle, and too confused to comprehend what was happening. Sierra began to move, carrying Oliver as carefully as she would one of her own cubs. Her massive paws made surprisingly little noise on the forest floor as she navigated through the trees with purpose. Oliver couldn't see where they were heading, but he noticed they weren't going deeper into the forest. They were moving toward the edge, toward town. At the playground, Oliver's absence had finally been noticed. His mother, Sophia Reed, frantically called his name, her voice rising with panic as the other parents joined the search, their flashlights cutting through the gathering dusk. "Oliver! Oliver!" Sophia screamed, her heart pounding as she scanned the empty playground. "Has anyone seen my son? He's wearing a blue jacket with a red stripe." The search party organized quickly, some parents heading toward the parking lot, others toward the community center. But Sophia stood frozen at the forest edge, a terrible certainty growing in her heart. Her son had always been drawn to the woods, to the butterflies and birds that made their home there. She took a step toward the dark trees, then another, ignoring the warnings of those around her. "Mrs. Reed, wait for the rangers. It's getting dark, and there have been bear sightings in these woods." But Sophia couldn't wait. She plunged into the forest, calling her son's name, unaware that at that very moment, Sierra was carrying Oliver along a different path, one that would lead them both to the small town's hospital on the opposite side of the forest. Sierra moved with surprising speed, her powerful muscles working tirelessly as she carried the boy. Oliver had stopped struggling, partly from fear, but also from a strange sense of security. The bear's fur was warm against the cooling evening air, and her movements, though swift, were careful not to jostle his injured ankle. As they emerged from the trees, the lights of Pinewood Valley glowed in the distance. Sierra paused at the forest edge, her keen eyes taking in the strange landscape of human civilization. She had ventured this close before, usually during harsh winters when food was scarce, but never with such purpose. Oliver lifted his head and recognized the outline of buildings ahead. "That's town," he whispered, amazement temporarily overriding his fear. "You're taking me home?" Sierra continued forward, keeping to the shadows between streetlights, avoiding the few cars that passed on the quiet roads. Some primal memory seemed to guide her, perhaps the scent of medicine, or the sight of humans entering and leaving a specific building when injured. Whatever the reason, Sierra moved with unwavering determination toward the small community hospital at the edge of town. The hospital's emergency entrance was quiet that evening, a blessing in the small town of barely 5,000 residents. Nurse Clara Winters stepped outside for a moment of fresh air after a long shift, clutching a cup of coffee that steamed in the cool night. She was the first to see them, a massive shadow moving across the parking lot, carrying something in its jaws. Clara's coffee cup hit the pavement with a splash as recognition dawned. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. It's a bear." She fumbled for the door handle behind her, ready to rush inside and sound the alarm when she realized what the bear was carrying. Not prey, not food, but a child, a living, moving child, whose blue jacket was instantly recognizable. "The Reed boy," Clara gasped. "It's the Reed boy." Sierra approached the lighted entrance cautiously, her eyes never leaving Clara's face. With exquisite care, she lowered Oliver to the ground just 20 feet from the emergency doors, gently laying him on the pavement. Oliver winced as his ankle touched the ground, but he remained surprisingly calm, his eyes fixed on the bear who had carried him to safety. "Thank you," he whispered, reaching out a small hand toward Sierra's massive muzzle. Sierra held his gaze for a long moment, her dark eyes reflecting the hospital lights. Then, with a soft grunt, she backed away, just as the emergency doors burst open and medical staff poured out, drawn by Clara's frantic calls. "There's a child and a bear in the parking lot." As doctors rushed toward Oliver, Sierra retreated toward the forest edge, watching from the shadows as the humans encircled the boy. She made no aggressive moves, no threatening gestures. She simply watched, as if ensuring that her charge was safely delivered. "It's Oliver Reed," someone shouted. "Someone call his mother." "What happened to you?" Dr. Marcus Chen asked, kneeling beside the boy while keeping a wary eye on the bear at the forest's edge. Oliver pointed toward Sierra's shadowy figure. "She saved me," he said simply, his voice filled with wonder. "I fell in the forest and hurt my ankle. She carried me here." The adults exchanged disbelieving glances, certain the boy was confused from pain or fear. But Clara Winters had seen it with her own eyes. The gentle way the bear had placed the child on the ground, the absence of any wounds beyond the swollen ankle. "I think he's telling the truth," she said quietly, her voice shaking. "I saw the bear carrying him. It was being careful." As the realization spread through the growing crowd, a hush fell over the parking lot. Eyes turned toward the forest edge where Sierra still stood, her massive silhouette visible against the darkness. "Thank you," Clara called out impulsively, raising her hand in a gesture that crossed the species barrier. Sierra watched for a moment longer, then turned and disappeared into the forest, leaving behind a community forever changed by what they had witnessed, and a story that would soon capture hearts far beyond the boundaries of Pinewood Valley. The news spread through the small town like wildfire, each telling more elaborate than the last. By morning, Sophia Reed had been reunited with her son, holding him tightly in the hospital room where doctors confirmed his ankle was badly sprained but not broken. Outside the hospital, reporters from neighboring towns had already gathered, drawn by the incredible tale of a mother bear who had saved a human child. "He says the bear carried him all the way from the forest to the hospital," Sophia told them, her voice still trembling from the lingering fear and relief. "I didn't believe it until the nurse showed me the security footage." The grainy video, captured by the hospital's outdoor cameras, showed unmistakable evidence of Sierra gently placing Oliver on the ground before retreating. Wildlife experts were baffled, offering theories about maternal instincts crossing species boundaries, while local rangers worked to identify the bear and ensure she would not be harmed by those who might still see her as a threat. In the days that followed, Oliver became something of a local celebrity. His story featured in newspapers across the country. He spoke of Sierra with a child's simple clarity, describing her not as a wild animal, but as a protective guardian who had known exactly what to do when she found him injured and alone. "She was like a mom," he told a reporter who had traveled all the way from the city to interview him. "Not scary at all. She was careful with me, like I might break." Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Sierra continued caring for her own cubs, unaware of the sensation she had caused in the human world. She had acted on instinct alone, the same instinct that drove her to protect her young, extended to a small human child who had needed her help. the bond between boy and bear would grow in unexpected ways in the months to come, changing not only their lives, but the relationship between the town and the wilderness that surrounded it. But that evening, as Sierra returned to her cubs and Oliver lay safe in his hospital bed, something fundamental had already shifted. A reminder that compassion could transcend the boundaries humans had drawn between themselves and the natural world. And in Pinewood Valley, people began to look at the forest with new eyes, wondering what other wonders and connections waited to be discovered just beyond the edge of what they thought they knew. 3 days after the miraculous rescue, Oliver sat propped up in his hospital bed, his injured ankle wrapped in a blue cast that was already covered with signatures from nurses, doctors, and the steady stream of visitors who had come to hear his story firsthand. The small hospital room overflowed with stuffed bears of every size, gifts from well-wishers captivated by the tale of the mother bear who had saved a human child. "And she didn't hurt you at all?" asked Dr. Chen, who had been checking on Oliver regularly since that night. He still found himself struggling to reconcile what the security footage had shown with everything he thought he knew about wild animal behavior. Oliver shook his head emphatically. "She was super gentle, like she knew I was hurt." He traced a finger along the ear of the largest stuffed bear, which sat beside him on the bed. "I wasn't even scared after a while. It felt safe." Dr. Chen made a note in Oliver's chart, then glanced at Sophia, who hadn't left her son's side since rushing to the hospital that night. The dark circles under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights and lingering fear, but there was something else there too, a quiet wonder that matched her son's. "The swelling has gone down considerably," Dr. Chen said. "He should be able to go home tomorrow, but he'll need to stay off that foot for at least 2 weeks. Sophia nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Doctor, for everything." After Dr. Chen left, Sophia moved to sit on the edge of Oliver's bed, brushing his dark hair from his forehead. "You know, hundreds of people have called the hospital asking about you. The story's even in the national news now." Oliver's eyes widened. "Really? Like the whole country knows?" "There's even talk about a documentary crew coming to town." She hesitated, then asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. "Are you sure you're okay, sweetheart? After everything that happened?" Oliver considered this for a moment, his young face suddenly serious. "I'm okay, but I'm worried about her, about Sierra." He had named the bear after remembering a nature documentary about the Sierra Nevada mountains. What if someone tries to hurt her because she came into town? Sophia squeezed his hand. "The rangers are making sure that doesn't happen. They've declared a protected area around where they think her den might be." Outside the hospital room, the hallway bustled with activity. Nurses hurried past, orderlies pushed carts of supplies, and at the far end, near the reception desk, a cluster of men in suits spoke in hushed tones with the hospital administrator. Among them was Mayor Robert Blackwood, whose normally jovial face was set in lines of concern. "This story's bringing a lot of attention to Pinewood Valley," the mayor said, adjusting his tie nervously. "We need to manage this carefully." Wildlife Division Chief Thomas Hargrove nodded in agreement. "The bear hasn't shown any further signs of approaching populated areas, but we can't guarantee she won't. Maternal behavior is unpredictable, especially if she's formed some kind of connection with the boy." "Connection?" The hospital administrator, Dr. Patricia Winters, raised an eyebrow. "Surely you don't think a wild animal formed an emotional bond with a human child?" Hargrove sighed. "I don't know what to think anymore. In 20 years working with wildlife, I've never seen anything like what's on that security footage. Bears don't bring injured creatures to hospitals. They just don't." "Well, this one did," Mayor Blackwood said firmly. And now we have reporters crawling all over town, wildlife enthusiasts setting up camps at the forest edge hoping to spot her, and about a dozen research teams requesting permits to study what they're calling unprecedented cross-species altruism. Dr. Winters glanced toward Oliver's room. That boy is at the center of something extraordinary, something that could change how we understand wild animals. Or something that could get people killed if they start approaching bears thinking they're all going to be gentle giants, Hargrove countered. We need a plan. Their discussion was interrupted by a commotion at the hospital entrance. A group of protesters had gathered, holding hand-painted signs with slogans like "Protect Sierra" and "She saved one of ours, let's save her." The crowd wasn't large, perhaps 20 people, but they were vocal, their chants audible even through the hospital's thick doors. Mayor Blackwood grimaced. And so it begins. Back in Oliver's room, a soft knock on the door preceded the entrance of a tall, lean man with weathered skin and kind eyes. He carried a worn leather satchel and smiled apologetically at Sophia. "Mrs. Reed, I'm Daniel Whitefeather from the Pinewood Valley Ranger Station. I was hoping I might speak with Oliver for a few minutes, if he's feeling up to it." Sophia hesitated, protective instincts flaring. "He's had a lot of visitors today." "It's okay, Mom," Oliver said, sitting up straighter. "Is this about Sierra?" Daniel nodded, pulling up a chair beside the bed. "It is. I've been tracking her for almost 5 years now. She's a remarkable animal, one of the oldest and largest females in our forest." He opened his satchel and pulled out a folder containing photographs. These were taken by our wildlife cameras over the years. Oliver leaned forward eagerly, studying the images of Sierra moving through the forest, fishing in streams, and guiding her cubs through snowdrifts. "She lost a previous litter 2 years ago," Daniel explained gently. "To poachers who came up from the south, it was a significant loss." Sophia's hand flew to her mouth. "That's terrible." Daniel nodded solemnly. "It is, but what's remarkable is that she didn't develop aggression toward humans afterward, which often happens in such cases." He turned to Oliver. "That's partly why I'm so interested in your experience with her. What you've described is behavior we've never documented before." Oliver traced a finger over one of the Sierra's photos. "She has sad eyes," he said quietly. "I noticed that when she found me, like she understood what it feels like to be scared and alone." Daniel and Sophia exchanged glances over Oliver's head, the simple observation striking them both with its profound insight. "Oliver," Daniel said carefully, "I need to ask you something important. When Sierra was carrying you to the hospital, did you notice anything unusual about her? Any markings or injuries that stood out?" Oliver thought for a moment, his brow furrowing in concentration. "She had a scar," he said finally. "On her right front leg, it looked like a big X." Daniel's expression shifted subtly. "You're sure about that? An X-shaped scar?" Oliver nodded confidently. "Yeah, I saw it when she put me down at the hospital. Why? Is that important?" Daniel sat back in his chair, his gaze distant. "It might be," he said. "It just might be." Before he could elaborate, commotion erupted in the hallway. Raised voices, hurried footsteps, and then the door to Oliver's room burst open. A harried-looking nurse stood there, her eyes wide. "Mrs. Reed, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this. Both of you." She gestured urgently toward the window at the end of the corridor. Daniel was on his feet instantly, moving with the practiced speed of someone accustomed to emergency situations. Sophia followed close behind, pausing only to assure Oliver she'd be right back. At the window, a small crowd of hospital staff had gathered, pointing and murmuring in disbelief. Sophia pushed through to the front, Daniel at her side, and felt her heart skip a beat at what she saw. There, at the edge of the hospital parking lot where the pavement met the beginning of the forest, stood Sierra. She was perfectly still, her massive form unmistakable even at a distance, watching the hospital with unwavering attention. And beside her, nestled against her fur, were her two cubs, visible now in daylight for the first time to human eyes. "She came back," Sophia whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Daniel shook his head in amazement. "In all my years, I've never seen anything like this." The bear made no move to approach further, staying at the boundary between forest and town as if respecting an invisible line. But her presence was a clear message, one that Sophia understood immediately. "She's checking on him," she said, certainty in her voice. "She's checking on Oliver." Behind them, the crowd in the hallway had grown, staff and patients alike drawn to the extraordinary sight. Someone had brought Oliver in a wheelchair, his elevated leg extended before him, his face pressed to the glass in wonder. "Sierra," he called out, his voice muffled by the window. "She brought her babies to see me." As if hearing him, though it was impossible at that distance, Sierra rose briefly to her hind legs, her full height magnificent against the backdrop of trees. Then she dropped back to all fours, nudged her cubs gently, and with one last look at the hospital, led them back into the protective shadows of the forest. The hallway erupted in excited conversation, but Daniel remained silent, his expression troubled. When Sophia finally turned to him, she found him staring not at where Sierra had disappeared, but at Oliver, who was beaming with joy. "What is it?" she asked quietly. "What's wrong?" Daniel hesitated. "That scar Oliver mentioned, the X mark, it's significant." "How so?" 5 years ago, a research team from Northview University conducted a study on bear cognition in these forests. They captured several bears, ran tests, and released them with tracking markers, small tattoos shaped like letters or simple symbols. Sophia frowned. "And Sierra was one of them? She has an X from this research?" "That's just it," Daniel said, lowering his voice further. "According to all the records, no bear received an X marker. That wasn't one of the symbols they used." "Then where did the scar come from?" Daniel's gaze drifted back to the forest edge. "I don't know, but there were rumors back then, rumors the university denied, about experiments that went beyond simple cognitive testing." A chill ran through Sophia that had nothing to do with the hospital's air conditioning. What kind of experiments? The kind that might explain how a wild bear could know to bring an injured human child to a hospital. Daniel's voice was barely audible now. The kind that were supposedly shut down for ethical concerns. Before Sophia could respond, a commotion at the end of the corridor drew their attention. The mayor and his entourage had spotted the crowd and were approaching rapidly, their expressions a mixture of concern and irritation. "What's happening here?" Mayor Blackwood demanded. "Why is everyone away from their posts?" "The bear returned, sir," a nurse explained excitedly. "She was just at the edge of the parking lot with her cubs, like she was visiting." The mayor's face paled. "The bear was here? Again?" "She stayed at the forest boundary," Daniel clarified quickly. "She showed no signs of aggression or intent to approach the building." Mayor Blackwood exchanged meaningful glances with Wildlife Chief Hargrove. "We need to talk," he said tersely. "My office, 30 minutes." As the officials moved away, Sophia returned to Oliver's side, her mind racing with questions about Daniel's revelations. Her son was chattering excitedly about seeing Sierra and her cubs, but Sophia found it hard to focus, distracted by the implications of what she'd just learned. Mom? Oliver's voice broke through her thoughts. Daniel said Sierra might be special, different from other bears. Do you think that's true? Sophia looked down into her son's earnest face and managed a smile. I think she must be very special indeed, sweetheart. Not many bears would know to bring someone to a hospital. I want to see her again, Oliver declared. Not just from a window. When my ankle gets better, can we go to the forest and thank her properly? The question sent a jolt of protective fear through Sophia. Oliver, honey, Sierra is still a wild animal. It might not be safe to, but she wouldn't hurt me, Oliver insisted. She could have hurt me in the forest, but she didn't. She helped me instead. Sophia was saved from responding by the return of Daniel, who had overheard the exchange. His expression was carefully neutral as he addressed Oliver. Understanding wild animals is complicated, Oliver. What Sierra did was extraordinary, but we still need to be cautious and respectful. He knelt beside the wheelchair. How about this? When you're better, I'll take you and your mom to one of our observation blinds near where Sierra often brings her cubs. It's safe, and you might get to see her again from a distance. Oliver's face lit up. Really? You promise? Daniel smiled, though Sophia noticed it didn't quite reach his eyes. I promise. And in the meantime, maybe you could help me with something. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a sketch pad. Could you draw that X-shaped scar you saw, as accurately as you remember it? As Oliver eagerly took the pad and began to draw, Daniel gave Sophia a significant look over the boy's head, one that clearly said they needed to talk privately, and soon. Outside the hospital, the news of Sierra's return had spread rapidly through the small town. The crowd of protesters had grown larger, reinforced by curious onlookers and several news crews who had captured footage of the bear at the forest edge. The atmosphere was charged with excitement, wonder, and the unmistakable sense that something unprecedented was unfolding in Pinewood Valley. But in a sleek black SUV parked across from the hospital, a man in a dark suit watched the scene with cold calculation. He spoke quietly into his phone, his eyes never leaving the hospital entrance. Yes, it's confirmed. The bear has the X marker. He paused, listening. No, sir, that's what concerns me. According to our records, Subject X-19 was terminated when the program shut down. Another pause. Yes, I understand the implications. If she's alive, and if she's demonstrating the advanced cognitive functions we engineered, he lowered his voice further, then the Reed boy is the least of our concerns. The man ended the call and started the engine, pulling away smoothly from the curb. As he drove, he glanced once in his rearview mirror at the hospital receding behind him, his expression hardening with resolve. Whatever had happened in those woods between Oliver Reed and the bear called Sierra was more than a heartwarming tale of animal instinct. It was the beginning of something that powerful interests had tried to bury 5 years ago, something that could change the relationship between humans and animals forever. And not everyone wanted that change to come to light. The Northview University Research Facility sat nestled among towering pines 20 miles north of Pinewood Valley, its modern architecture designed to blend with the surrounding forest rather than dominate it. From a distance, the complex of low buildings might have been mistaken for an upscale retreat center, with its natural wood siding and green roofs. Only the electrified fencing and security cameras mounted on inconspicuous poles suggested something more restricted occurred within its boundaries. Dr. Eleanor Brantley stood at the window of her office, watching a late afternoon rainstorm drench the research grounds. At 56, she carried herself with the poised confidence of someone accustomed to authority, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun, her lab coat impeccably pressed despite the long day. The wall behind her desk was lined with awards and diplomas, evidence of a distinguished career in animal neuroscience and behavioral biology. She didn't turn when the door opened behind her. "I assume you've heard," she said, her voice carefully modulated to reveal nothing of her inner thoughts. Dr. James Mercer, her longtime colleague and the facility's head of security, closed the door quietly before responding. "It's all over the news. A mother bear rescuing a human child, bringing it to a hospital." He moved to stand beside her at the window. "They're calling it a miracle of cross-species empathy." Eleanor's reflection in the glass remained impassive. "And the identification? Are we certain?" "As certain as we can be without direct examination. The ranger who's been tracking her confirmed the X-shaped marking." James hesitated. "Eleanor, if this is X-19... Subject X-19 was terminated in 2020, she interrupted sharply. "All records confirm this. All protocols were followed." James's reflection met hers in the glass. "Then how do you explain what happened in Pinewood Valley?" Eleanor finally turned from the window, moving to her desk where a tablet displayed multiple news articles about Oliver and Sierra. She swiped through them with controlled precision, pausing on an image captured from the hospital security footage, the massive bear gently placing the boy on the ground. Perhaps it's simply a case of mistaken identity. Another bear with a similar marking. That's quite a coincidence, don't you think? A bear with an X marking exhibiting exactly the kind of advanced cognitive function and cross-species empathy that Project Genesis was designed to develop? James's voice lowered. "The board is concerned, Eleanor. If X-19 survived somehow, if the project didn't end when we reported it did." "The project was shut down," Eleanor said firmly. "The ethical concerns were valid, the funding was pulled, and all test subjects were either released with standard tracking markers or humanely euthanized if they'd undergone significant neural modification." She closed the tablet with a decisive snap. X-19 was in the latter category. "Then who signed the termination order?" James pressed. "Because I've been reviewing our records, and there's a discrepancy in the documentation." Eleanor's carefully composed expression flickered for an instant. "What kind of discrepancy?" "The authorization signature doesn't match any of our team leaders. It looks like it might have been forged." James pulled out his own tablet and opened a file, placing it before Eleanor. "Compare it to your signature from the same month." Eleanor studied the document, her brow furrowing slightly. "This proves nothing. It could have been signed when I was rushed or tired. Or," James said quietly, "someone on the team couldn't go through with it. Someone decided that X-19 deserved a chance at life, despite the modifications." Eleanor's gaze snapped up to his face. "That would have been a flagrant violation of protocol and potentially dangerous to the public. No one on my team would have taken such a risk. People do unexpected things when they form emotional connections, even with research animals." James's tone was gentle but insistent. "You spent more time with X-19 than anyone. You were the one who noted her exceptional intelligence, her unusual capacity for empathy in the early tests." Eleanor stood abruptly, the movement uncharacteristically sharp. "I hope you're not implying what I think you are, James." "I'm not implying anything. I'm trying to understand what's happening now because the board is sending a recovery team to Pinewood Valley tonight. They want X-19 contained before this story gets any bigger." "Contained?" Eleanor's voice grew cold. "She has cubs, which presents another problem. If she's passed on the genetic modifications, they weren't designed to be heritable. We don't know that for certain. The long-term studies were never completed." James moved toward the door, then paused. The team has orders to bring in the boy as well, for observation. Eleanor's face paled. A human child? They can't possibly be. They're concerned about exposure. If the boy spent significant time in close contact with X-19, there could be psychological effects we need to monitor. This is absurd. The public is already invested in this story. You can't simply make a child disappear. James's expression was grim. The cover story is already prepared. A specialized treatment center in the city, offering advanced care for his injury and trauma. The mother will be persuaded to cooperate. Eleanor sank back into her chair, suddenly looking every year of her age. This isn't science anymore, James. This is something else entirely. I know. He hesitated at the door. The team arrives at midnight. I thought you should know, in case you wanted to prepare any statements for the record. His emphasis on the last words was subtle but unmistakable, a warning between old colleagues. After James left, Eleanor sat motionless for several long minutes, staring at the rain streaking down her office window. Then, with sudden decision, she pulled a secure phone from her desk drawer and dialed a number she hadn't used in nearly 5 years. "It's me," she said when the line connected. "X-19 has been found. They're sending a team tonight." She listened briefly, then continued, "Yes, I'm sure. But there's more. She has cubs now, and she's formed some kind of connection with a human child." Another pause as she listened. "I know what we agreed, but this is different. If they take her now, after what she's done, if they separate her from her cubs—" Eleanor's voice cracked slightly. "We can't let that happen, not again." The voice on the other end spoke for several minutes, and Eleanor's expression gradually shifted from desperation to resolute determination. "Understood. I'll leave now. Just make sure he's ready." Night had fallen over Pinewood Valley Community Hospital, the corridors dimmed to allow patients to rest. In Oliver's room, the soft beeping of monitoring equipment provided a rhythmic backdrop to Sophia's quiet reading. She had been taking turns with Oliver's favorite adventure books for the past hour, watching his eyelids grow heavier with each page. "Mom?" Oliver's drowsy voice interrupted the story. "Do you think Sierra knows I'm getting better?" Sophia marked her place in the book. "I don't know, sweetheart. Bears are very intelligent, but it's hard to know exactly what they understand." Oliver yawned, snuggling deeper into his pillow. "I think she knows. That's why she came back today, to check on me." "Maybe you're right," Sophia conceded, unwilling to diminish her son's wonder, despite her own lingering fears about the bear's unusual behavior. A soft knock at the door preceded the entrance of a night nurse Sophia hadn't met before, a tall woman with kind eyes and prematurely silver hair peeking out from beneath her cap. "Just checking vitals before shift change," the nurse explained quietly, moving to Oliver's bedside with practiced efficiency. She checked the monitors, made a few notes on her tablet, and then, almost casually, added, "I heard you had quite the visitor today." Oliver perked up immediately. "Sierra came back. She brought her cubs to see me." The nurse smiled. "That's remarkable. You must have made quite an impression on her." "She made an impression on me, too," Oliver said earnestly. "Daniel says she's special, different from other bears." "Daniel Whitefeather? The ranger?" The nurse adjusted Oliver's IV line with careful hands. "He would know, I suppose." Sophia studied the nurse with growing curiosity. Her uniform and ID badge seemed perfectly in order, but something about her manner, the precision of her movements, the careful attention she was paying to Oliver's words, seemed more focused than typical night rounds required. "I don't think we've met," Sophia said. Are you new to the hospital? Rotating night staff, the nurse explained smoothly. I usually work in pediatrics at Northview Regional, but they're short-staffed here this week. She turned her attention back to Oliver. That must have been scary, being carried by such a big bear. Oliver shook his head firmly. Not scary. Well, at first a little, but then it felt safe. He lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. She has a special mark on her leg, like an X. Daniel seemed really interested in that. Something flickered in the nurse's eyes, so quickly that Sophia might have imagined it if she hadn't been watching closely. An X mark? How interesting. The nurse finished her checks and moved toward the door. Try to get some rest now. I hear you might be going home tomorrow. That's what Dr. Chen said, Sophia confirmed, rising to her feet. Excuse me, but I didn't catch your name. The nurse paused at the doorway. Eleanor, she said after a brief hesitation. I'm sorry, I should have introduced myself properly. She offered a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'll be back to check on him in about an hour. After she left, Sophia sat on the edge of Oliver's bed, troubled by the encounter, though she couldn't pinpoint exactly why. Mom, when we go home, can we leave something in the forest for Sierra? Like a thank you present? Oliver's voice pulled her from her thoughts. We'll see, sweetie. Let's focus on getting you better first. She brushed his hair back from his forehead, relieved to find it cool and dry. Why don't you try to sleep now? The sooner you rest, the sooner we can go home. Oliver yawned again, his eyelids drooping. Kay, love you, Mom. Love you too, my brave boy. Sophia waited until Oliver's breathing deepened into sleep before slipping quietly into the hallway. She needed coffee and a moment to stretch her legs after sitting for so long. The corridor was quiet, with only the occasional nurse passing by on rounds. She made her way to the small waiting area where a coffee machine stood, grateful to find it still working at this late hour. As she waited for her cup to fill, a movement at the end of the corridor caught her attention. The nurse who had checked on Oliver, Eleanor, was speaking intently with someone just out of sight around the corner. Sophia wouldn't have thought much of it, except for the urgency in the woman's posture and the furtive way she kept glancing over her shoulder. Curiosity piqued, Sophia abandoned her coffee and moved closer, staying close to the wall. As she neared, snippets of conversation became audible. Not enough time, Eleanor was saying. The team will be here by midnight. A man's voice responded, too low for Sophia to make out the words. I understand the risks, Eleanor continued, but we have a responsibility. X-19 was never meant to... She broke off suddenly as another nurse approached from the opposite direction. Eleanor straightened, nodded politely to her colleague, and then slipped around the corner with her mysterious companion. X-19. The designation lodged in Sophia's mind, connecting instantly to Daniel Whitefeather's troubled expression when Oliver had mentioned Sierra's X-shaped scar. Something was happening, something that involved her son and the bear that had saved him, and Sophia suddenly felt certain it wasn't benign. Abandoning all pretense of casual movement, she hurried back to Oliver's room, only to find the door slightly ajar. Panic surged through her as she pushed it open, expecting the worst. But Oliver was still there, sleeping peacefully. Nothing seemed disturbed except the sketch pad. The drawing Oliver had made of Sierra's X mark was gone from the bedside table where he had left it. Sophia moved to her son's side, gently brushing his shoulder. Oliver, wake up. He stirred reluctantly, blinking up at her in confusion. Mom? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, she lied, keeping her voice steady through sheer force of will. but I think we need to leave a little earlier than planned. How would you feel about going home tonight instead of waiting until morning?" Oliver rubbed his eyes. "But Dr. Chen said, 'I know. But I've been thinking it might be better for you to rest in your own bed.'" Sophia was already gathering their belongings, shoving them haphazardly into her overnight bag. "Do you think you can manage with the wheelchair if I help you?" Before Oliver could respond, a soft knock sounded at the door. Sophia froze, her hand instinctively moving to shield her son. But it was Daniel Whitefeather who entered, his expression grave. "Mrs. Reed, I was hoping I'd find you still awake." He closed the door behind him, speaking in a low, urgent tone. "I need you and Oliver to come with me, right now." "What's happening?" Sophia demanded, her protective instincts flaring. "Someone took Oliver's drawing of the X mark, and I just overheard a nurse talking about some kind of team arriving at midnight." Daniel's face tightened. "I was afraid of this. There isn't time to explain everything, but Oliver's bear, Sierra, is in danger, which means Oliver might be too. Danger from what? Who would want to hurt a bear? People who don't want the world to know what Sierra really is." Daniel moved to the window, peering out cautiously before drawing the curtains closed. 5 years ago, Northview University conducted experiments on local wildlife. Cognitive enhancement, neurological modifications. They were trying to increase animal intelligence, to see if certain species could be taught to understand human commands beyond basic training. Oliver sat up, fully awake now. They did experiments on Sierra. Daniel nodded grimly. She was known as X-19 in their program. According to official records, she was euthanized when the project was shut down due to ethical concerns. Except ... She's alive, Sophia finished, and showing exactly the kind of behavior they were trying to create. Which makes her extremely valuable to certain people, and potentially dangerous to others. Daniel checked his watch. "There's a recovery team on the way here now. They'll take Sierra, her cubs, and possibly even Oliver for observation." Oliver's eyes widened in fear. "They want to take me away?" "They won't," Sophia said fiercely, putting her arm around his shoulders. "But I don't understand. Why would they want Oliver?" "Because he's the first human to form a connection with one of their enhanced subjects. They'll want to study that interaction, understand how it happened." Daniel moved to the door, listening for any approaching footsteps. "We have maybe 20 minutes before security does their rounds. Can you get him dressed and ready to move?" Sophia hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Yes, but where are we going?" "Someone's waiting to help us. Someone who knows more about Sierra and the program than anyone." Daniel's expression softened slightly as he looked at Oliver. "And I believe she also knows where to find your bear friend." Oliver's face lit up with hope through his fear. "We're going to help Sierra? That's the plan, buddy. But we need to move fast." As Sophia helped Oliver dress and slip into a jacket, her mind raced with questions and doubts. Was she really about to flee the hospital with her injured son based on what sounded like a conspiracy theory? Was she putting Oliver in more danger by trusting Daniel? But the memory of the nurse's furtive conversation, the missing drawing, and the strange coincidence of someone from Northview University appearing on Oliver's floor, it all pointed to something sinister beneath the surface of this miraculous story. "Ready?" Daniel asked, helping Oliver into the wheelchair. Sophia took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready?" Daniel opened the door cautiously, checking both directions before motioning them forward. "We'll take the service elevator to the basement. There's a loading dock that's usually unmanned after 10 p.m. They moved swiftly through the dimmed corridors, Sophia pushing Oliver's wheelchair while Daniel walked slightly ahead, guiding them away from the more populated areas of the hospital. They had almost reached the service elevator when a voice called out behind them. "Mr. Whitefeather? Mrs. Reed, what are you doing?" They turned to find Dr. Chen approaching, a clipboard in his hands and confusion on his face. Daniel stepped forward smoothly. "Just taking Oliver for a brief wheelchair ride, Doctor. He was feeling restless, and we thought some movement might help him sleep." Dr. Chen frowned. "At this hour? And with his discharge scheduled for tomorrow?" He looked at Sophia, who fought to keep her expression neutral. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Reed?" Before she could respond, the elevator doors at the end of the hall opened to reveal Eleanor, the nurse who had checked on Oliver earlier. She stepped out and froze when she saw the tableau before her: Daniel, Sophia, Oliver in the wheelchair, and Dr. Chen blocking their path. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Eleanor spoke, her voice pitched low and urgent. "Dr. Chen, I need you to trust me. These people need to leave the hospital immediately." Chen's frown deepened. "I don't believe we've met. Are you new to the staff?" "She's not staff," Daniel said quietly. "Are you, Doctor Brantley?" Eleanor's gaze locked with his. "No, I'm not. And we're running out of time." She turned to Dr. Chen. "In approximately 15 minutes, a team of people claiming to be specialists from a research hospital will arrive. They'll have papers authorizing Oliver Reed's transfer to their facility. Those papers will look legitimate, but I can assure you, their intentions are not in Oliver's best interest." Chen looked between the four of them, clearly struggling to make sense of the situation. "What is this about? Who are you, really?" "I was the lead researcher on Project Genesis at Northview University," Eleanor said, her words coming faster now. "We developed cognitive enhancement protocols for various species, including bears. The bear that brought Oliver to this hospital was one of our subjects, one that was supposed to have been euthanized when the project was terminated." Understanding dawned on Chen's face. "The X mark. The boy said the bear had an X-shaped scar." Eleanor nodded. "Subject X-19. She was the most successful case we had, showing unprecedented levels of empathy, problem-solving, and cross-species recognition. But when the ethics board shut us down, all enhanced subjects were ordered to be terminated." "But you couldn't do it," Sophia said softly, pieces clicking into place. "You couldn't kill her, so you faked the documentation and released her instead." "Yes." Eleanor's admission was barely audible. "And now they know she's alive. They want her back, and they want to understand how she formed a connection with Oliver." Dr. Chen was silent for a long moment, his professional demeanor warring with the extraordinary claims being made. Finally, he looked down at Oliver, who was watching the adults with wide, fearful eyes. "Is this what you want, Oliver? To leave the hospital?" Oliver nodded firmly. "I need to help Sierra, Dr. Chen. She saved me. Now I have to save her." Chen sighed, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a keycard. "The loading dock is monitored by security cameras, but the old service tunnel to the boiler room isn't." He handed the card to Daniel. "This will get you through the maintenance door at the end of this hallway. The tunnel comes out behind the hospital near the staff parking lot." "Thank you," Sophia said, genuine gratitude in her voice. "I'll delay anyone who comes looking," Chen promised. "But be careful, all of you." He looked pointedly at Eleanor. "And I expect a full explanation someday, Dr. Brantley." Eleanor nodded. "You'll have it when this is over." They moved quickly now, Daniel leading the way to the maintenance door while Eleanor followed behind, keeping watch. The door opened with a soft click when Daniel swiped the keycard, revealing a narrow corridor lit by flickering fluorescent bulbs. "I'll go first," Daniel said, taking control of Oliver's wheelchair. "Mrs. Reed, stay close behind us. Dr. Brantley, right behind you." The maintenance tunnel smelled of dust and old pipes, the concrete floor rough beneath the wheelchair's wheels. Oliver winced with each bump, but didn't complain, his young face set with determination that belied his years. "Where are we going?" Sophia asked as they navigated the dimly lit passage. "After we get out of here, I mean." "To find Sierra," Eleanor replied. "I know where her den is likely to be, based on the tracking we did before." She trailed off, then continued more firmly. "We need to reach her before the recovery team does." "And then what?" Sophia pressed. "We can't exactly hide a bear." "No," Daniel agreed. "But we can expose the truth about Project Genesis. Make it impossible for them to simply take Sierra and her cubs without public scrutiny." They reached the end of the tunnel, where a heavy metal door stood between them and freedom. Daniel pushed it open carefully, revealing the dark expanse of the staff parking lot beyond. A light rain was falling, the drops gleaming in the yellow glow of security lamps. "My truck is just over there," Daniel said, pointing to a battered green pickup at the far end of the lot. "We need to move quickly but casually. If anyone asks, we're simply taking Oliver home a bit early." Eleanor paused, her hand on Sophia's arm. "There's something you should know before we go any further. Something about Sierra and Oliver's connection." Sophia turned to face her, rain dampening her hair as she stood in the doorway. "What is it?" "The enhancements we made to Subject X-19, to Sierra, didn't just increase her intelligence. We were attempting to create a form of empathic cognition, the ability to sense and respond to the emotional states of others." "Like how she knew I was hurt and scared?" Oliver asked. Eleanor nodded. "Exactly. But the process we used was experimental. We incorporated human neural stem cells into specific regions of her brain to enhance those pathways." Daniel stared at her. "You put human cells into a bear's brain?" "It was theoretical at first. We never expected the integration to be so complete, or the resulting cognitive changes to be so profound." Eleanor looked at Oliver with something like wonder. "When Sierra found you in the forest, the connection she formed wasn't just random. Her brain is literally part human. She recognized something in you, your fear, your pain, in a way no ordinary bear could." The revelation hung in the rain-dampened air between them, its implications expanding like ripples in a pond. "So, when the recovery team takes her," Sophia said slowly, "they're not just capturing an animal, they're taking someone who's partly human," Oliver finished, his voice filled with certainty. "That's why she knew to bring me to the hospital. That's why she came back to check on me." Eleanor nodded gravely. "And that's why we can't let them take her. Not again." A distant sound of vehicles approaching the hospital's main entrance spurred them into motion. They moved quickly across the parking lot, Daniel pushing Oliver's wheelchair while Sophia and Eleanor flanked them, keeping watch for any signs of security. They had almost reached Daniel's truck when headlights swept across the lot as a vehicle turned in from the access road. Everyone froze as the beams illuminated them briefly before the car, a sleek black SUV, continued toward the hospital's main entrance. "That's them," Eleanor whispered. "The recovery team. We need to go. Now." Daniel unlocked the truck and helped Oliver into the back seat, where Sophia joined him, cradling his injured leg carefully as he settled in. Eleanor took the passenger seat while Daniel started the engine. keeping the lights off until they had rolled silently to the exit. As they pulled onto the main road, Sophia looked back at the hospital, where several figures in dark clothing were already entering through the main doors. Whatever was happening, whatever Sierra truly was, and whatever connection she shared with Oliver, it was clear that powerful forces were determined to control it. She turned back to her son, who was staring out the window with an expression of fierce determination that both worried and prodded her. In the space of a few days, he had gone from an ordinary child to the center of something extraordinary, something that blurred the boundaries between humans and the natural world in ways she was only beginning to comprehend. "Where exactly are we going?" she asked as Daniel accelerated onto the highway that would take them north, toward the deeper forests beyond Pinewood Valley. "To a research outpost about 30 miles from here," Eleanor answered. "It was abandoned when the university pulled funding, but someone has been using it as a monitoring station for Sierra and other released subjects." She glanced at Daniel. "Your colleague, I believe." Daniel nodded. "Martin Gray. He's been tracking unusual bear behavior in these forests for years. After Oliver's rescue hit the news, he contacted me with some interesting data." "What kind of data?" Sophia asked. "Movement patterns that suggest problem-solving, territorial boundaries that adapt to human activity, evidence of tool use." Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "All signs pointing to intelligence far beyond what we'd expect in wild bears." Oliver leaned forward eagerly, wincing slightly as the movement jostled his injured ankle. "There are more bears like Sierra?" Eleanor shook her head. "Not exactly like her. X-19-Sierra was unique. She received the most advanced treatment in the program, but several other subjects did receive partial enhancements before the project was shut down." The implications of this settled over the group as they drove deeper into the night, leaving the lights of Pinewood Valley behind. The rain intensified, drumming on the roof of the truck and streaming down the windows, transforming the world outside into a blur of shadows and reflected light. Inside, Oliver had fallen into an exhausted sleep against his mother's shoulder, the events of the day finally catching up with him. Sophia stroked his hair absently, her mind still processing everything she had learned. "I still don't understand," she said softly, not wanting to wake her son. "If this research was shut down 5 years ago, why come after Sierra now? Why not when she first showed signs of unusual behavior? Because what she did with Oliver changes everything," Eleanor replied, her voice equally low. "Bringing an injured human child to a hospital demonstrates not just intelligence but moral agency, a sense of what's right, what's needed. It suggests that the enhancements created something much closer to human consciousness than anyone anticipated. Or intended," Daniel added grimly. Eleanor nodded. "The philosophical and ethical implications alone are staggering. Is a bear with partial human neural integration entitled to rights, protection, autonomy? These are questions no one was prepared to answer. Questions that certain interests would prefer to study behind closed doors without public scrutiny," Daniel concluded. They fell silent as the truck climbed a winding mountain road, the forest pressing close on either side. The rain began to ease, replaced by a thick mist that curled between the trees like ghostly fingers. After nearly an hour of driving, Daniel turned onto a barely visible track that led deeper into the woods. "We're almost there," he said, navigating carefully over the rutted path. "The outpost is just ahead." As they rounded a final bend, a small cabin came into view, its windows glowing with warm light that spilled onto the wet ground outside. A battered Jeep was parked nearby, and a tall figure stood on the porch, silhouetted against the cabin's interior brightness. Daniel parked beside the Jeep and turned to Sophia. "Wait here with Oliver until I make sure everything's secure." He and Eleanor exited the truck and approached the cabin, speaking briefly with the waiting figure before motioning for Sophia to join them. She gently woke Oliver, who blinked in confusion before remembering where they were and why. "Are we going to see Sierra now?" he asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Not yet, sweetheart, but we're with people who are going to help us find her." Sophia helped him from the truck, supporting him as he hopped on his good foot rather than attempting to use the wheelchair on the muddy ground. The man on the porch hurried down to assist them, his weathered face creased with concern. "You must be Mrs. Reed, and this brave young man must be Oliver." He smiled kindly at the boy. "I'm Martin Gray. I've been following your story with great interest." Inside, the cabin was rustic but comfortable, with scientific equipment sharing space with more homey furnishings. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, taking the chill from the night air. Maps covered one wall, dotted with colored pins and handwritten notes. "Please, sit." Martin gestured to a worn sofa near the fire. "You must be exhausted, and the boy needs to rest his leg." Sophia helped Oliver settle onto the sofa, elevating his injured ankle on a cushion as Dr. Chen had shown her. The warmth of the fire and the relative safety of their surroundings allowed her to release some of the tension she'd been carrying since their escape from the hospital. "Thank you for helping us," she said to the room at large. "But I need to understand exactly what's happening. What danger is my son in? And why is this bear so important to these people?" Martin exchanged glances with Eleanor and Daniel before sitting in a chair opposite Sophia. What Dr. Brantley created with Project Genesis was revolutionary, far more significant than most of the research team realized at the time. They weren't just enhancing animal intelligence. They were blurring the line between human and animal consciousness, which scared a lot of powerful people, Daniel added, leaning against the map-covered wall. Pharmaceutical companies, military interests, ethics committees, everyone had an opinion about where the research should go or whether it should exist at all. The public shutdown was just that. Public, Eleanor said quietly. But certain aspects of the research continued underground, under different management and with different goals. Oliver, who had been listening intently despite his fatigue, spoke up. "They want to make more bears, like Sierra? Smart bears that can understand humans?" Eleanor's expression softened as she looked at the boy. "In a way, yes, but not for the reasons we originally intended. Our goal was to better understand animal cognition, to find ways to communicate across species boundaries for conservation and coexistence. And now," Sophia pressed, "now they want to weaponize it," Martin said bluntly. "Imagine enhanced predators that can understand complex commands, operate in environments too dangerous for humans, with the natural stealth and strength of wild animals but the cognitive flexibility of human operatives." The implications hung heavy in the room, disturbed only by the crackling of the fire and the soft patter of renewed rain on the cabin roof. "But what does any of this have to do with Oliver?" Sophia asked, her arm tightening protectively around her son's shoulders. "Sierra chose to help your son," Eleanor explained. She recognized his distress, understood that he needed medical attention beyond what she could provide, and took action that required complex understanding of human structures and behaviors. That kind of cross-species empathy was theoretical until now. They want to understand how and why that connection formed, Daniel continued. Whether it was random or if there's something specific about Oliver that triggered her response. Oliver straightened, wincing slightly as the movement jostled his ankle. "I want to help Sierra," he declared, She saved me. I'm not afraid of the people looking for us." Sophia squeezed his shoulder gently. "I know you're brave, sweetheart. But these people sound dangerous. We need to be careful." Martin moved to the maps on the wall, pointing to a circled area about 5 miles from their current location. "Based on the tracking data we've collected, Sierra's den is likely in this area. It's remote, difficult to access, which has probably helped her remain undetected for so long. We need to reach her before the recovery team does," Eleanor said, joining him at the map. "If we can document her behavior, her interaction with Oliver, make it public." "They won't be able to simply make her disappear," Daniel finished. Sophia looked between them, uncertainty warring with determination. "You want to take my injured son into the deep forest to find a bear, even an enhanced one, in the middle of the night, while being pursued by people who want to take both the bear and possibly my child for some kind of classified research. Put that way, the plan sounded not just risky but borderline insane. Yet the alternative, waiting for the recovery team to find them, possibly separating her from Oliver, seemed equally unthinkable." Before anyone could respond, a low, rhythmic beeping came from one of the monitoring stations set up near the window. Martin hurried to check it, his expression growing urgent as he studied the display. "Movement at the north perimeter sensor," he reported. "Multiple heat signatures approaching from the access road." Daniel moved to the window, carefully pulling back the curtain to peer into the darkness. "No headlights, they're coming in dark." "The recovery team," Eleanor said grimly. "They must have tracked us somehow." "My phone," Sophia realized with horror. "I still have my cell phone. Could they have traced it?" Martin nodded. "Almost certainly we need to move, now." The cabin erupted into controlled chaos as Martin and Daniel quickly gathered essential equipment, while Eleanor helped Sophia get Oliver back on his feet. "There's a service trail that leads deeper into the forest," Martin explained, shouldering a backpack full of gear. "It's rough, but my Jeep can handle it. It will take us close to Sierra's territory." "What about Oliver's injury?" Sophia protested. "He can barely walk." "I can manage, Mom," Oliver insisted, though his pale face betrayed the pain his brave words tried to hide. "We don't have a choice," Daniel said grimly, peering through the window again. "They're less than half a mile out." Eleanor moved decisively to a cabinet near the fireplace, pulling out a small medical kit. "I can give him something for the pain. It will help him manage for the next few hours." She looked to Sophia for permission. With reluctant agreement, Sophia nodded, and Eleanor quickly administered a mild pain reliever, helping Oliver into a warmer jacket that Martin provided. "This way," Martin urged, leading them through a back door that opened onto a narrow path behind the cabin. His Jeep was parked there, hidden from the main approach by a stand of thick pines. "Stay low and quiet." They piled into the vehicle, Oliver sandwiched securely between his mother and Eleanor in the back seat. Martin started the engine but kept the lights off, navigating by memory along the dark service trail that wound deeper into the forest. "How will we find Sierra in the dark?" Sophia whispered, her arm tight around Oliver's shoulders. "I've been tracking her for months," Martin replied, his eyes never leaving the treacherous path. "She follows a pattern, especially now with cubs. There's a meadow about 4 miles from here where she often feeds in the early morning hours." "And if she's not there?" Daniel questioned. "Then we move to her secondary territory near the ridge," Eleanor said confidently. "I know her habits. She's a creature of routine, even with her enhanced cognition." Oliver leaned forward between the front seats. "She'll be there," he said with absolute certainty. "She knows we're coming." The adults exchanged glances, unsure whether to attribute his confidence to childish hope or something more, some connection that defied their scientific understanding. They drove in tense silence for nearly 20 minutes, the jeep bouncing over roots and rocks, splashing through shallow streams. The forest seemed to close in around them, branches scraping against the windows, the darkness broken only by occasional glimpses of the star-filled sky through gaps in the canopy. Finally, Martin cut the engine at the edge of a sloping meadow bathed in pale moonlight. Mist curled around the tall grasses, giving the open space an ethereal quality. "We walk from here," he whispered, "and remember, no matter how enhanced she is, Sierra is still a wild animal with cubs. We approach with caution." They exited the jeep quietly, Daniel supporting Oliver while Sophia carried a small backpack Martin had prepared with emergency supplies. Eleanor led the way, moving with surprising confidence through the dark forest. "How far?" Sophia asked softly, watching Oliver for any signs that the pain was becoming too much to bear. "Not far," Eleanor replied. "There's a ridge just beyond the meadow where she often rests with the cubs." They made slow progress across the misty field, the wet grass soaking their pants to the knees. Oliver moved with determined focus despite his injury, his eyes constantly scanning the tree line ahead. Then he stopped so suddenly that Daniel nearly stumbled. "There," Oliver whispered, pointing toward a cluster of boulders near the far edge of the meadow. At first, Sophia saw nothing but shadows. Then a larger shadow moved, separating itself from the darkness, a massive form that rose on hind legs at the meadow's edge, silhouetted against the night sky. Sierra. The bear stood perfectly still, her head raised as if testing the wind. Behind her, two smaller shapes moved among the rocks, her cubs, watching curiously from the safety of their mother's shadow. "She's here," Oliver breathed, his voice filled with wonder. Eleanor put a restraining hand on his shoulder. "Wait, let her recognize us first." The group stood motionless in the moonlit meadow, exposed and vulnerable. Sophia fought every maternal instinct that screamed at her to pull Oliver away from potential danger, to flee back to the jeep and the relative safety of civilization. But Oliver showed no fear. Instead, he straightened, drawing away from Daniel's support to stand on his own despite his injured ankle. "Sierra," he called softly, the name carrying clearly in the still night air. The bear lowered herself to all fours, her massive head swinging toward the sound. For a long, breathless moment, she studied them across the expanse of moonlit grass. Then, with deliberate grace that belied her size, she began to approach. "Stay absolutely still," Martin whispered urgently. "All of you." Sierra moved with the fluid power of a predator, covering the distance between them with surprising speed. When she was about 20 feet away, she stopped, rising again to her full height, nearly 7 feet of wild power and primeval strength. But it was her eyes that held Sophia transfixed, dark, intelligent, and so deeply aware that it sent shivers down her spine. These were not the eyes of a simple animal. There was someone looking back from those depths, someone who understood far more than any bear should. "Hello again," Oliver said quietly, taking a small step forward, despite Sophia's instinctive grab for his arm. Sierra lowered herself to all fours again and moved closer, her movements now careful, almost gentle. When she was just feet away, she stopped and made a soft chuffing sound. Not quite a growl, but a form of communication nonetheless. "She remembers me," Oliver said with absolute conviction. What happened next would be debated, analyzed, and marveled at for years to come. Sierra extended her massive muzzle toward Oliver's outstretched hand, her breath warm against his small fingers. There was recognition there, unmistakable even to the skeptical adults watching in amazed silence. Then a sharp crack echoed through the meadow, a gunshot splitting the night's quiet. Sierra reared back, not hit, but startled. Behind them, lights appeared at the forest edge. Flashlights, sweeping across the misty grass in searching beams. "The recovery team," Eleanor gasped. "They've found us." Martin reacted instantly, pulling a small device from his pocket and activating it. "Camera drones," he explained tersely. "Live streaming to a secure server. Whatever happens now, there will be witnesses." Sierra's cubs emerged from the rocks, scampering to their mother's side with frightened whimpers. The bear positioned herself between her young and the approaching lights, her posture no longer curious but protective. A mother prepared to defend her children. "We need to move," Daniel urged, reaching for Oliver. But Oliver shook his head, his young face set with determination beyond his years. "Number running won't fix this. They'll just keep coming after Sierra." Before anyone could stop him, he hobbled forward on his injured ankle, placing himself between Sierra and the approaching recovery team. The bear didn't flee, didn't attack. She watched with those unnervingly intelligent eyes as the small human child positioned himself as her protector. "Oliver!" Sophia cried, moving to retrieve her son, only to be stopped by Eleanor's restraining hand. "Wait," the scientist whispered. "Watch." The recovery team had reached the meadow's edge now, 6 figures in dark tactical gear, their faces hidden behind specialized masks, weapons raised and ready. "Step away from the bear," a mechanized voice commanded through a speaker. "This is a secure operation, authorized by Federal Wildlife Management." Oliver stood his ground, small but unbending in the moonlight. "Her name is Sierra," he called out, his voice remarkably steady. "She saved my life. She carried me to the hospital when I was hurt. She's not just a bear." The lead figure paused, weapon still raised but hesitating. Behind him, more vehicles were arriving at the forest edge, their headlights cutting through the mist. "That animal is property of Northview University Research Division," the mechanized voice continued. "Step aside or we will be forced to take action." "She's not property." Oliver's voice rang out across the meadow, powerful in its conviction. "She thinks and feels. She makes choices. She chose to help me." Martin's drones hummed overhead, capturing everything: the armed team, the child standing protectively before the bear, the scientists and parent watching from a few yards away. Lived to the world, impossible to erase or deny. Eleanor stepped forward now, moving to stand beside Oliver. "I'm Dr. Eleanor Brantley, lead researcher on Project Genesis. The bear you're attempting to capture is Subject X-19, and she is demonstrating exactly the enhanced cognitive and empathic capabilities our research was designed to develop." Through his mask, the team leader's posture showed recognition of her name. "Dr. Brantley. You were specifically instructed to terminate this subject when the project was discontinued." "I chose not to," Eleanor replied, her voice steady. "And that choice has led to one of the most significant breakthroughs in cross-species interaction ever documented. Sierra saved this child through understanding, choice, and empathy, qualities we once believed were uniquely human." The standoff stretched, tension crackling in the night air. Behind them, Sierra remained watchful, her cubs now pressing against her massive flanks, their small eyes reflecting the flashlight beams. Then came a new sound: the whump-whump of helicopter rotors approaching from the south. Spotlights swept the meadow as a news chopper appeared above the tree line, drawn by Martin's live stream alert. "You're too late," Daniel called to the recovery team. The world is watching now. Whatever happens here tonight will be witnessed by millions." The team leader's posture shifted, his weapon lowering slightly as he spoke into a communication device on his shoulder. After a tense exchange, he turned back to the group. "This operation is suspended pending review," he announced, the mechanical voice unable to hide the frustration beneath. "But this isn't over." He gestured to his team, and they began a tactical retreat toward their vehicles. As they withdrew, Oliver turned to Sierra, who had remained surprisingly calm throughout the confrontation. He reached out a hand toward her, and in a gesture that would become iconic in footage shared worldwide, the massive bear gently pressed her muzzle against the small human palm. "Thank you," Oliver whispered, "for everything." Sierra made a soft sound deep in her throat, then turned to her cubs, nudging them back toward the safety of the forest. At the edge of the trees, she paused, looking back one last time at the humans who had stood in her defense, before disappearing into the protective darkness of her domain. The events in the meadow that night became known as the Pinewood Convergence, the moment when humanity was forced to reckon with the consequences of blurring the lines between human and animal consciousness. Martin's live-stream footage, combined with the news helicopter's coverage, made it impossible for Northview University or its shadowy backers to reclaim Sierra quietly. Instead, the story captured global imagination, sparking intense debate about animal consciousness, ethics in scientific research, and humanity's responsibility to the enhanced beings it had created. In the months that followed, a remarkable transformation took place in Pinewood Valley. What began as a simple rescue became the foundation for the world's first cross-species communication research center, established in the forest where Sierra made her home. Eleanor Brantley, granted immunity for her whistleblowing revelations about Project Genesis, was appointed as its scientific director, with Martin and Daniel joining her team. The center operated on a revolutionary principle. Rather than capturing enhanced animals for study, researchers would enter their territory as respectful visitors, learning from the animals on their own terms. Sierra and her cubs became the first subjects in this new paradigm, protected by international conservation agreements that recognized their unique status. Oliver, once he had fully recovered from his injury, became a regular visitor to the center. His natural ability to connect with Sierra made him an invaluable bridge between species. Though he was too young to understand the scientific implications, he grasped the fundamental truth that had eluded so many brilliant minds, that respect and empathy were the real keys to communication across the boundaries that separated living beings. "She understands more than people think," he often told visitors who came to learn about the remarkable bear. "But she understands different things, in different ways. We have to learn her language, not just expect her to learn ours." Sophia, initially terrified by the thought of her son regularly interacting with a wild bear, gradually came to trust the profound connection between them. She took a position as the center's educational coordinator, developing programs that taught children about respecting wildlife and recognizing the intelligence and emotional lives of animals. 3 years after that night in the moonlit meadow, Oliver stood at the edge of a mountain stream, watching as Sierra taught her now growing cubs to fish in the clear water. He was taller now, his face beginning to lose its childish roundness, but his eyes still held the same wonder that had first recognized Sierra as more than just a bear. "They're getting really good at it," he observed to Eleanor, who stood beside him making notes on a tablet. "They are," she agreed, "and showing problem-solving approaches we've never documented in unenhanced bears. The neural integration is expressing itself differently in each of them." Oliver had learned enough about the science now to understand what that meant. Sierra's cubs, though born naturally, had inherited aspects of their mother's enhanced neural structure. They were the first generation of a new kind of being, neither fully bear nor anything approaching human, but something unique and worthy of understanding on their own terms. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked suddenly. "Creating Sierra? Changing her like that without her permission?" Eleanor was silent for a long moment, watching the bear family in the stream. "I regret the arrogance behind it," she said finally. "The assumption that we had the right to reshape another species according to our vision. But I can't regret that Sierra exists as she is." She smiled at the boy beside her. "She saved you, after all, and in doing so, maybe saved something in all of us." Later that evening, as the research team gathered around a campfire near the observation post, Sophia watched her son sitting slightly apart, gazing into the darkness where they knew Sierra's den lay hidden among the rocks. Daniel joined her, offering a cup of coffee. "He's changed too, you know, not just physically." Sophia nodded. "He sees the world differently now. Connections, relationships, the thin lines between species, things most adults never even consider." "The empathy goes both ways," Eleanor added, joining their conversation. "Our newest scans suggest that Sierra's neural pathways continue to develop, adapting to her interactions with humans, particularly with Oliver. They're learning from each other." In the firelight, Martin unfolded a map marked with tracking data from the various enhanced bears they had identified throughout the region. "The real question is what happens as these animals continue to raise offspring. Will the enhancements stabilize? Increase? What happens if they begin to organize, to communicate their knowledge to unenhanced members of their species?" The questions hung in the night air, unanswerable but fascinating. A glimpse of a future where the boundaries humans had drawn between themselves and the natural world became increasingly permeable. As the adults discussed possibilities and implications, Oliver slipped away from the campfire, moving with quiet confidence through the dark forest. He knew these paths now, could navigate them almost as well as Sierra herself. At a small clearing not far from the research camp, he stopped and waited. Minutes passed, marked only by the soft sounds of the forest at night, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the whispering passage of a gentle breeze. Then came the sound he was waiting for, the deliberate tread of heavy paws on forest debris. Sierra emerged from the shadows, alone this time, her massive form moving with the fluid grace that still amazed everyone who witnessed it. "Hey," Oliver said softly, not moving toward her but simply acknowledging her presence. Sierra settled onto her haunches a few feet away, regarding him with those intelligent eyes that had first connected with him in his moment of greatest vulnerability years ago. No scientists observed this moment. No cameras recorded it. Just a boy and a bear, sitting in companionable silence beneath the stars, two beings from different worlds, connected by something that transcended the boundaries of species and science. In that quiet communion lay the greatest lesson of all, that the capacity for connection, for understanding, for seeing beyond differences to recognize another conscious being. This was neither uniquely human nor animal, but the shared birthright of all living things. Sierra had known this truth instinctively when she found an injured child in her forest. Oliver had recognized it when he looked into her eyes and saw not a beast but a person of another kind, and in their connection a new way forward emerged, not just for enhanced bears and the humans who created them, but for all the countless species with whom humanity shared the planet. A way based not on dominance or exploitation, but on respect, empathy, and the profound recognition that consciousness, in all its varied forms, deserved protection and reverence. As the night deepened around them, Oliver reached out a hand, and Sierra gently pressed her muzzle against his palm, a gesture now familiar but never ordinary, a bridge across worlds that had once seemed impossibly far apart. "Thank you for finding me," Oliver whispered. And though Sierra couldn't answer in words, the understanding that passed between them needed no translation.